about skateboarding, but you're just not very good at jumping up and down on your favorite piece of wood. Crap skateboarding, crap skateboarding podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Crap Skateboarding podcast, a weekly dive into skateboarding for the average skater, hosted by me, James.
And me, Jack.
In this podcast, two distinctly average skaters will try to cover pretty much everything you might want to know about skating, from total beginners to midlife crisis resurgent shredders.
Each week we'll be discussing a range of exciting topics regarding skateboarding in these uncertain times.
And this week, our topic is...
Drum roll, please!
Barriers in skateboarding.
So, James.
Yes.
What's this all about, son? What are you talking about?
Well, last week we talked about people starting skating and picking it up, and we're kind of moving on a little bit from that and heading towards perhaps some of the things that people might find challenging, some of the first things that they might come across where they think, oh, actually, this might be a bit difficult, and how to come those various different barriers that we all come across and those challenges that we all find when we're starting a new sport or trying to start something again when we're old and decrepit, like we're trying to do.
Cool. Give me an example. So what might be considered a barrier? What do you think?
Okay. I think probably one of the most primary ones that I found, one of the biggest barriers that I found, certainly at the moment during these lockdowny days, is access to spots. So we discussed last week how skateboarding is a brilliant activity to be doing during sort of these lockdowns and sort of during the pandemic in general, and just day-to-day life, really. It's really good fitness, it's really good escapism for the mind, and there's a whole other host of benefits that we have discussed and I'm sure we'll continue to discuss. But at the moment, accessing spots is probably one of the biggest problems that most people have. Now, myself, I don't have anywhere that I can immediately skate around near me, which is the biggest barrier that I have for skateboarding at the moment. And I think you're in a bit of a better position than I am. You've got your mini ramp, haven't you? So
yeah, it's a funny thing though, isn't it? Because I completely agree with you. But I live, if you remember from last week, I live in the arse end of nowhere. I live in a small farming village in North Somerset, near Bristol, between Bristol and Bath. And there's not loads here to skate. Hence why we built a mini ramp in the garden during the last pandemic. My very sketchy but very beloved mini ramp. However, I was thinking about this. So when we were growing up, James, for anyone who doesn't know, we grew up also in the arse end of nowhere, in the very bottom of Cornwall, near Land's End.
Deepest, darkest bits of Cornwall, yeah. And
we probably didn't have access to what a lot of people would register as skate spots, places that are good for skateboarding. I think there's a lot of joy in the crap. There's a lot of joy to be had in the sort of mediocrity of stuff that you can find a way to skate. So let me tell you, this is what I've been thinking. So I've been feeling a little bit recently, I've been feeling a bit fatigued with concrete parks, basically. I think they're great, I think they're wonderful, and they're purpose-built and excellent. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. However, I think back to our childhood, where we would find bizarre things to skate and think of ways to skate them. And there was so much creativity that evolved out of that. And some of the best times I've had skateboarding came from that. And recently, last year, when I got back into skateboarding big time again because of the pandemic, I was finding things to skateboard that were, so one example was a telegraph pole that had fallen down in the middle of the road. And I spent a whole day skateboarding that and thinking, you know what I mean? I've had some of my best experiences skateboarding in the last year on these little things because I find them and I've really enjoyed thinking, well, how can I use this creatively? And I think that in a way, not having access to brilliant parks can breed a lot of creativity.
Well, no, I completely agree with you, and you're absolutely right on that behalf. When it comes to skateboarding ultimately is a creative outlet for a lot of people. And you've got your sort of general tricks that most people associate with skateboarding, like kick flips, heel flips, backside flips, 180s. And they're great. And all you really need is a flat ground, is any sort of flat ground at all to do that. You can even do them stationary if all you've got is kind of like a patio or something. However, you can skate pretty much anything, can't you? I remember certainly we would skate anything that we came across, and our village was small. We spent a lot of time with literally just a curb, wasn't it? It was just a curb and with a really sketchy landing and lots and lots of pebbles. But that's all we could skate, so that's what we did skate. And because skateboarding has so many opportunities for personal style and personal creativity, you are kind of shaped by the spots that surround you to a degree. But equally, if all you have is a little bit of flat ground, in my case, I only had flat ground outside my house when I was skating a lot of the time. I got quite good at flat ground and freestyle skateboarding, sort of Rodney Mullen style. And I think your skateboarding identity is very much shaped by the spots you have available to you, but don't limit yourself to it.
Have you read The Mutt? It's
I have read The Mutt.
Autobiography.
Yes, The Mutt is a brilliant book.
Oh, it's
I would
amazing.
highly recommend reading it to anyone.
And he's what? So yeah, The Mutt by Rodney Mullen. He's definitely one of the greats. But and we are not the greats. I particularly am.
No, not by a long shot.
I'm not even the reasonables. But Rodney Mullen, it's interesting you say that, because he similarly grew up, from what I remember, in the arse end of nowhere, and his style really developed from not being able to get to skate parks when skate parks were just taking off. There's a whole chapter just about him spending hours and hours on end in a barn outside his house, just on some flat ground, creating tricks.
And most of our most common trips that we know now, the kick flip, 360 flip, heel flip, they all derive from him being stuck in a very small space with not a great deal of access to ramps, because most of the skaters at the time were hitting up kickers and bowls and pools and sort of rails, and were using obstacles more than anything. If you look at some of the old retro footage of people skating back in sort of like the late 80s, it was very much sort of obstacle based, whereas Rodney Mullen came along, suddenly freestyle exploded in popularity, and it was sort of and that led directly down to street skateboarding. So limitations can breed that kind of creativity, which actually, certainly in that case, led to changing the entire sport.
So I was thinking, this is part of what's been making me really want to just go and skate crap and find sketchy things to skate on recently. I've got a real hankering. And I think that part of it for me as well, it comes from, skateboarding. Yes, it's an art. Yes, it's a sport for some people. It is an industry. And, we all buy into the videos and the brands and things like that. And as a consumer, I know that I get a real kick out of watching videos where people are skating weird, unforgiving things in weird, unforgiving ways. That's what I like to watch.
Related to that, have you seen I can't remember his name, he's very big on Instagram now. He pretty much only skates a stationary box in his garage. And he's got a carpet as well. And he's got incredibly good at flipping into and out of stools and grinds. And you only
from a carpet.
From a carpet onto his ledge, and he was doing like backside flip, tail stool, like big flip out, and variations of that. And he's literally just got a box in his garage and a carpet and his board, and he comes up with these incredible combinations on there.
I read a thing from Mike Vallely once saying someone asked Mike Vallely why he said he was talking about his early days skateboarding. And obviously he was the second wave of the Bones Brigade lot. And one of the first real big influences on street skateboarding, I suppose, in its modern iteration. And they were listing all the tricks that he'd invented, and they're mostly different kinds of plants, hand plants and foot plants that involve taking part of you off the skateboard and balancing on it. And so I can't remember who was interviewing him, but they said, well, why did you do that? And he said, well, because I couldn't varial flip. And then he said, I can varial flip now, but at the time I couldn't do it, and that seemed to be the way it was going, was just increasing how you had your kick flip, and then they started kick flipping and rotating the board 180 degrees, and then 360 degrees, you had 360 flip, and he said he couldn't keep up with that, but he said he had a lot more upper body strength than all of his contemporaries, so he could innovate in that way. He said, well, I can't be more precise with my feet, but I can be more precise with my arms and my hands, and I can catch things pretty well. And again, it's that whole thing. We don't all do it the same, but you work with what you've got, and But if you've got a really sort of scrappy spot near you, or you've just got a little patio, or you've just got a little curb or a ledge to skate, and you're running out of ideas, there's a huge amount of inspiration available pretty much anywhere. Like if you go onto YouTube and type in curb skating,
or mini ramp skating, or ledge skating, block skating, ramp, bank skating, any variation of. There's going to be thousands of videos of different people trying different things on them. So even if you are horribly uncreative like I am, then there's always some sort of inspiration out there. So if you are looking at your sort of, what at the time looks like a sad little ledge, you're not quite sure what you can do on it, go online, have a look, see what other people are doing, see what looks fun, what looks cool, go out and give it a go. It's all over YouTube, all over Instagram, it's everywhere.
Totally. Go onto Instagram, type in Goo Miyagi, see what he's up to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you want to see some real unconventional skateboarding.
He was a professional skateboarder.
Yes.
He chose to step down from professional skateboarding because he didn't like, I think he's notoriously hard to work with. He does things his way. He will only put carpet on his skateboard instead of grip tape, which means I think he's not that consistent when it comes to landing things, surprisingly. So filmers don't like working with him. He decided to step away and just skateboard for fun again after being professional for a few years. So I was watching him on Instagram the other day. I was watching him with a rubber dinghy tied to his back, grinding across a duck pond, a ledge in the water, and then ollieing out of the grind backwards onto his back and floating away with his legs and board in the air on a dinghy.
And that still counts. That's skateboarding.
That's skateboarding. Yeah. Brings us nicely onto our next point of conversation, mate. So, access to video. You're talking about access to videos. You're talking then about if you don't know what to do, get onto YouTube, get onto Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we mentioned this briefly last week, is that certainly when we started skateboarding, because we're old and broken, we didn't really have much motivation or inspiration. I didn't even see that many people skating. So the only people that we really saw skating was each other and whoever was on the Tony Hawk skate videos, and anyone at the skate parks. But now there's skateboarding media and skateboarding content everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, you name it, there's incredible skateboarding going down. And there's trick tips galore. I mean, you search kickflip trick tip on YouTube, you're going to get hundreds of results. And there's always the different variations of the different bits of advice. But the rate at which you can progress now, if you sort of put your mind to it, is unbelievable. So those barriers that maybe some of us used to have, where it was literally just, we've got our boards, what can we do with this? You can now find an absolute sort of treasure trove of different bits of information and trick tips and videos anywhere. And we'd highly recommend doing that, because if anything's going to get you progressing quickly, it's watching other skaters, seeing what they do it, hearing how they do it.
When I got my mini ramp back in June, July, something like that, I hadn't actually been on a mini ramp for years, really. Maybe occasionally, maybe sort of once a year, I'd had a couple of spins on it, realised that I couldn't remember how to do it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when I was a lot younger, I was quite happy just dropping in, rock to fakie, tail stool. I think I really kept it to that, really, maybe an axle stool occasionally. And I thought, okay, well, I've got this in my garden. I want to do more. There's a lot that I'm still not comfortable with, but I do want to progress at my own speed, but I want to progress. Let's give something else a go. And I found this guy, 30 mini ramp tricks straight away, 30 mini ramp tricks. And he's not, the problem with this is sometimes on YouTube and things like that, you do get people who think they're all that, they come with a bit of a demeanor. But equally, there's some really helpful people. This guy seemed great. He seemed professional. I've watched so many. I've learned to do all sorts since, again, nothing that impressive. But I can do like a couple of hand grabs now, and I can do slasher grinds and 5-0s and just other things that, that I probably wouldn't have had the confidence or really the know-how in the past to do it. I wouldn't have really known where to begin to look for that information.
I'd like to point out that every single one of the tricks that Jack's just mentioned, if it sounds sort of reasonably easy, just bear in mind that Jack's doing it on a ramp that does shift by about a foot every time he goes up to the coping. So he's making it much harder for himself. And they are far more impressive in real life than they sound.
But this is it, man. Like like we said, it's I'm pretty mediocre. It's all about your own, having your own targets, having your own things to progress into.
I mean, for me, I have been skating 23 years, something like that, on and off. It's consistently for about 6 years, and then off for a while, and then back in again. And the one trick that I always visualize in my mind, like I could be sat there watching TV, just visualizing it, but never actually managed to land, is a blunt to fakie. That's all I want to. That's my one mini ramp trick. I'd absolutely
that looks so easy.
Never get around to it.
Yeah, but that's a weird one, because I always look at that and I think that looks like it's just a rock the fakie, but a bit higher up. You kind of feel like that's as much confidence as that's what I tell myself. Yeah. I tell myself that that's more confidence than skill, surely.
No, absolutely. We were our skateboarding social circle for a very long time. And we also had a couple of other mates that coincidentally have also started skateboarding again this year. They've all started skating again, which is really lovely to see.
Best time to do it.
It'd be nice to hang out with them again. And a lot of that confidence does come when you're skating with like-minded people. And not to say you're trying to show off, but you are a bit more driven to land tricks and a bit more confident, I think, if you're skating around people who share that love of skateboarding. And so trying to finding like-minded people is really important as well. And that's become even easier nowadays as well. There's always Facebook groups of people popping up and people saying, hey, I'm looking for somebody to skate with, I want to go skate. And I personally skate, I find I skate much better when I'm with other people who are sort of pushing me and encouraging me to land tricks. And likewise, I feel like that, like I'm passing that on as well. If somebody's shouting, go on, do it at me when I'm trying a trick, and sort of cheering when I stack it, and I'm feeding that back to them, and I find you get that really positive feedback loop where it's a really encouraging environment where everyone's trying to support each other, and then you end up skating much better as a result of it.
Yeah, and also the payoff is so much better. You know, I think about us in the last year or so, and there was a day, I think we mentioned it last week, it may come up a few times, where we all went, James, our friend Tom, who also skates, and we went out dressed up as Halloween monsters to make a fun Halloween video. It was a lot of fun, but that day I've got a good example of that, where I spent a huge portion of the day trying to 50-50 a sort of rainbow ledge and then pop shove it out, and I kind of landed it a couple of times, but James, he wouldn't. I mean, he could see that I could do it, and I think if I was by myself, I would have accepted that I had technically landed it. So I would have accepted that a lot sooner. Whereas James, I think, could see I could do better. It was within my grasp, so he just kept me motivated for longer. And it really did pay off. I spent a long time trying to get that, and I think that makes a huge difference. I think it's and then being able to celebrate that with someone is so much better. Actually, yes, I kind of hated you while it was happening, but I felt great when I landed it, and I think we enjoyed that together. And what also, it's not just your friends, if you've got good friends, if you can make good friends, if you've got the right kind of friends, they won't be egging you on out of, it's not competitiveness against each other so much, but they should be and will be equally stoked when you land something.
I was as invested in that trick as you were at that point.
Yeah.
Because I could see you getting closer and closer and closer and closer, and I was feeling sorry for your ankles, but
they're still not right.
so stoked. The thing is, this doesn't even have to happen to people that you're friends with. Like, I went to skate park at lunchtime on a really hot day. My local park near here. It's a little concrete park, and there's a rail there. And I was lip sliding the rail. That was the trick I wanted to do, was to lip slide the rail. So I was trying that. And then a guy who was there, I didn't know, I'd never met him before, but a guy who was there saw me trying that, and then decided he wanted to learn to board slide the rail. And so he started trying to board slide. So I was trying to lip slide, he was trying to board slide, and just encouraging each other on. And it got to the point where we'd been trying this for a while, and I landed the lip slide a few times. I was just kind of getting comfortable with it, and he was still trying to land the board slide. And I really needed to get home. I needed to get back, but equally, I was so invested in this guy's board slide that we had both been trying these tricks together, that I'd ended up just staying there for an extra half an hour, just waiting for him to land it, because I really wanted to see him land it. And I didn't know, we didn't know each other, and we didn't kind of chat all that much, but there's that kind of mutual.
But there's a camaraderie, right, in the community.
Mutual camaraderie.
When it's at its best, there's a really good.
And it's brilliant, and you don't often get that with many other sports. Certainly, I surf, and you quite often you sometimes get that, but it's much more competitive. Whereas with skateboarding, there can be a competitiveness to it, but it's mostly very, very encouraging. Most people at skate parks are incredibly encouraging of each other, because it does take a real sort of, you know, grit and determination to try a trick over and over and over and over and over.
Skateboarding hurts. Skateboarding hurts like nothing else hurts, in my experience. You know, like I've tried, you know, I used to surf a lot when I was younger, and I've been snowboarding a few times, and like, yeah, you can hurt yourself in those things, but there's a special kind of pain in skateboarding that really only exists in skateboarding, I think, where when it hurts, it really hurts. It's like skin from your knees, gravel in your face, pain. And I think, like, you've really got to love it to do it. You know, I think that nobody's going to, you know, if you're squeamish, it's not for you, possibly. You know, I think it is. I think you get it, and you can see the pain in each other. It also comes back to, you know, we've spoken about it loads, but that it's so applicable. This thing of skateboarding being this funny line between sport in a way, but art. It's that line between art and sport, and I think that's where it comes down to a lot. It's not, you're not competing really in a normal environment. Actually, you're just stoked on that you all love this thing, and you all want to see each other progress, and you want to see what different things you're bringing to the table. And I think it's very different. I once saw, and this is a competitive thing, but obviously I say I once saw, everybody's seen it, but back in the day when Tony Hawk did the 900 after his time had run out in the X Games. And I've seen it, actually it's from, I'll tell you what it's from Tony Hawk's autobiography, which I think is called How to Skateboard and Not Kill Yourself.
That's the one.
They're aptly named, I think. And there's a whole bit about that day. You know, I suppose that's his legacy, really, in so many ways. If he could have a single thing, that's probably it. And he was talking about how it was the X Games, it was the final for the vert, for the best trick, and he'd already lost because he'd wasted all his time trying to do a 900-degree spin, and he hadn't done it in his allotted time. He'd already lost. They already knew. I think it was Bob Burnquist maybe won already. No one had stopped to talk about that, including Bob Burnquist himself. He didn't really mind. And they carried on for 25 minutes after the end of the competition. They were supposed to have left the building, just everyone telling him to try again. And no one had mentioned, they hadn't even mentioned who had won, even though we knew it wasn't Tony Hawk. And Bob Burnquist was there, like, people apparently, even before the timer had gone out, the competitors were giving him their slots, so they all get a certain amount of time, and they were refusing to skate, even though, you know, it's a competition, to let Tony have their slot, because they wanted to see him do the 900. And I mean, that's exactly it. He said, you know, he did it, he landed it, obviously, got carried away, and he said, the people who were lifting me up that day, he said, first of all, I lost. I got the lowest point on the table because I hadn't landed anything at the time. But the people who were carrying me around, cheering my name, they were my competitors. They were the people that I was competing against. One of them had beat me. You know, but actually they all wanted to see that this thing could be done, and that this thing you've been trying to do. And I think there's a beauty in that. I don't think you'd ever see that in, I mean, with bias, but I don't think you'd ever see that in like football or rugby. I know that, you know, I like ice hockey, and you wouldn't see that in ice hockey. It's very particular to skateboarding, I think.
Yeah, well, a lot of that comes down to the fact that it's an individual sport rather than a team sport, isn't it? So any mistakes that you make, you have to own. But equally, any payoff, any big successes, like the 900, for example, any big successes are also entirely yours to own. But because everyone's in the same boat, everyone wants to push the boundaries of what they're capable of. Everyone wants to see you push those boundaries. Everyone wants to see those boundaries expanded upon. And you see it in sort of even now as Street League and the X Games. Somebody will go and do a run, they'll land an insane trick, and then they'll roll back up, and like all the other competitors will run up to them and be like fist bumping them and pat them on the back. Whereas like in many other sports, people would be simmering or trying to think about how they would beat that. But it's just a celebration, isn't it? Really.
You know what?
That's skill.
Totally. And you know, we were talking last week, and we won't dwell on it, but we were talking about the Olympics, and there's people for and against it, and we think it's largely a good thing. I think we agree. I think that's one thing to look out for, is that we don't want that to be lost. If it becomes an international recognized competition, there's got to be a way to keep that there.
I think it's so deeply ingrained into every skilled skater's psyche that's never going to be lost. And because they're all on the same teams, they all go on tour together, they all work together, they're all mates, like they're all friends. Like, you know, they might be competing separately. They might be competing separately as individuals on those particular occasions, but if they're all riding for Element, they're all filming the same Element videos, for example, and, you know, and just using Element as an example there, they are all, most of the top skaters are all friends at the end of the day. It's really rewarding, and it's one of the great things about skateboarding is that I know that if I haven't been skating for a while, and if I roll up to a skate park, and I am feeling maybe a bit self-conscious, and I in my head I'm going, oh, I'm not as good as I used to be, I'm not as good as I might usually be, and I could be quite judgmental of myself, but absolutely nobody else there knows that or even cares. Everyone else there, if I rock up to a skate park and I, you know, might have a couple of years ago landed a 360 flip down the 4-set, and then I rock up this time and just about 180 down it. If it takes me a few attempts, you know, more often than not, there'll be somebody there popping the board against the floor when he sees me land that. Like, it will be, and it happens. You know, it's all constantly rewarding, no matter what you think about yourself, your own skill. There's that. I think that atmosphere is constantly rewarding, and it's really, you know, you can turn up to a skate park and everyone just wants each other to have a good time.
Yeah, I think this has got better too. I think this has improved as skateboarding has aged. I know that when we were kids, there was an element of that in the community where we would skateboard, you know, as we got a little bit older, maybe less the late 90s, but more into the early 2000s when we started going to the parks a bit more and things like that. I think that existed, but I think that we spoke about that boys club mentality. I think there was a lot of muscle flexing and a lot of that if you were in the group, they would be like that, but if you were outside of it, it was a little bit more tribal. I think that's, I don't want to say it's gone, because I'm sure that to some people it won't appear to be, and they're right. You know, we're very privileged, our experience is different, but I do think it's improving, and I think it's getting better with age. I think everybody's feeling a bit like that. People love it and they've gone away from it, they've got jobs and families, and then I think if you love it, you can't stay away for too long. And I think that people have matured, and I think that the whole thing is that side of it, that real supportive community seems to have improved tenfold in the years that we've been doing it, I would say.
Yeah, and you see this kind of in the skill, in the skills people are acquiring and how quickly they're acquiring them. Is that we've got a friend, Rowan, who has only just started skateboarding, and he was coming to the park with us, and he was going down and the parks were quite busy when we were going down, wasn't it? And we were going down to Victoria Park and Bath, the concrete path. It was quite busy, and Rowan has only just started, but he was chatting to most people there, and they were chatting to him back, and there's some really good skaters there, all sort of actively encouraging him and promote and you know, generally being really accepting and really positive about the fact he was there just trying to skate and learning to skate. And one of the guys who actually sold him his board from the shop came down to the skate park and was offering advice and encouraging him, and he got quite good quite quickly, certainly much quicker than we ever did.
That's true. Yeah,
he was learning board slides in his first week.
Well, again, he was at my. He came to our mini session in my garden, and he was dropping in there. You know, as in, and not dropping in like first time, because it doesn't. We all know if you've tried to drop in on a mini ramp, you're going to fall off before you do it. But he had that real persistence about him, you know. And again, it comes back to that community. Maybe we helped, I'd like to think, because we were there encouraging him, you know, saying, you know, get back up and eat. But do you know, I that's the most stoked I've ever been to see someone drop in.
Yeah,
you know, because I was watching my friend learn something new, you know, and I'm still proud of him. You know, I know that was awesome. Hopefully, when this is over, we'll do that again. You know,
that was kind of like, that was an example of kind of like a pretty much perfect summer's evening, wasn't it? Where we're all around there. We had some ciders, we had some music going. The sun was out. Rowan was, we chucked a load of pads at him, and we were standing around the ramp, just trying to, you know,
That was the night when you, James, said, "I bet." Those are the words used. I bet that you can't 5-0 the top of your mini ramp while chugging a cider. And some people would say that's not a challenge worth rising to. Bloody did it! Bloody did it!
He did. There's pictographic evidence and everything of Jack carving along his coping, cider in hand, like a proper Southwest shredder.
I got worse as that evening went on. I'm not sure why.
Can't begin to imagine why.
Oh,
can't wait
mate.
for the weather to get better. We can do that again.
Oh yeah, I just keep every now and again. I let the dog out and I stand in the garden and I look at that mini ramp. That's probably very icy because everything is, and I just think, we'll have our day again. Soon enough. We'll get the barbecue on.
It'll be glorious.
Absolutely, buddy. Absolutely. But then by that time, I'm, we'll have been in lockdown. I'm probably going to be morbidly obese. I'm probably going to have to relearn everything, relearn my weight all over again.
Forgotten how to Wally. Pretty sure
brings us nicely onto the next thing we were going to talk about, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've got written down here, what are the barriers to skateboarding? You've said fitness could be a barrier.
Yes. I mean, this
or a perceived barrier, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. A perceived barrier to some. So ultimately, this does depend on your individual circumstances, doesn't it? Really. I mean, when we started, we were both quite sort of lithe and young and full of energy, and absolutely fine. But certainly, skateboarding is a sport or sort of hobby or passion, all three of those things, that does take a toll on your body, in that it can be exhausting, it can hurt. And ultimately, it does come down to kind of your physical capacity. And that physical capacity can be either a help or a hindrance, really. I know that if I've gone a long period of time without skateboarding, if I go and then skate for 2 or 3 days in a row, my ankles will hurt for about a week afterwards. And it's reflective of my age. But
that's so true, though. Yeah, I mean, the ankles thing is when you get to a certain age, and I'm only 30. I'm not an old man. But I'm not as young as I was, and my ankles now, that's the main thing. So back in, maybe it was March, me and you, was when the pandemic hit, and we both were going out for our one exercise a day, skateboarding, I think, largely. And that's when I got really, really heavily back into it. And I did that non-stop until the weather turned. So maybe October, just skateboarding every day. I was skateboarding, at least for a while. And my ankles still hurt now. I feel like I only realized how bad they were because I wasn't skateboarding, so I stopped taking as many ibuprofen to combat them hurting. And it does take a toll.
But this is one of the things that has certainly become much more prevalent nowadays. We're much more sort of health conscious and health focused than we used to be. Certainly in the 90s, none of the skaters really cared about kind of their physical condition. As long as they could skate, they could skate. But people, certainly the pros now, are taking a much more proactive approach. And I'd certainly encourage this to a lot of people, is that actually one of the best ways to improve your skateboarding is to kind of look after your joints, look after your muscles, look after your own body. I said we're not by any means old, but over the last year, I've also started doing a lot more stretching and a lot more sort of flexibility.
I need to get in on this.
Tell you now, the difference that has made to my skateboarding, the difference it made to my skateboarding in the summer was astonishing. Like the fact that my hips could move more normally, and the fact that my knees could move more normally.
When we next skate, I want you to lead me in a warm up.
A limber warm up will be those dudes in the corner of the park. Stretching away. No, but I mean, generally speaking, if you go into skateboarding and you haven't done much activity before, ease yourself into it a little bit, I would suggest, because certainly if you go in all guns blazing, you will be a bit sore afterwards, you will hurt a bit afterwards, and you want to sort of make it sustainable. And skateboarding is tiring. Certainly, Jack, you'll remember this, when we used to go to Mount Hawk and we would skate for 8 hours straight. The level of sweat that kind of my clothes would be drenched in.
Oh my goodness!
Like it kept the weight off us, didn't it? It's very good for fitness. It's very good for health, and it's very good for strengthening your bones. But equally, making sure that certainly if you're taking it up when you're older, make sure you are protecting and actively encouraging your ability to move in certain planes of motion, and keeping yourself, sort of fairly strong and fairly fit will help you not only skate longer on individual sessions, but be able to skate more frequently.
In fact, James, you actually, speaking of taking better care of your muscles, because that's where I find that the problem lies, really. It's great for the cardio, but it does a lot of just damage, measurable damage. And you introduced me to that, an app called Fit. So I had been doing some ankle exercises, which is as lame as it sounds. It sucks, but it makes a difference. I hate myself when I'm doing it because it's so. This is the other thing. So I've written down a note here because I thought this is a weird thing to talk about with skaters because you don't want to tarnish everyone with the same brush, and you might disagree, but I would say in many cases it's important to acknowledge that skateboarding, or those who gravitate towards skateboarding, aren't always those who gravitate towards athletic activities in general, because it has a counterculture about it. So a lot of the people in it are not the people who would be the first to think about their own physiology and actually the ways to take care of themselves.
Absolutely.
And they might even, if you're like me, which is going to sound awful, I'm slightly repulsed by it when I'm doing it myself. I feel like it just really turns me off. I don't like it being part of it. But, and I hate to tell you this, James, since I've started doing my ankle exercises, it has been a lot better. And I think that's what I need to do. There's something in it.
No, you're absolutely right. And the thing is, you don't really notice it when you're in your teens or early 20s. You don't really notice it. You can skate for days, you can skate for hours, the weight falls off when you're skating. It is of itself excellent for your health, generally speaking, far more so than just sitting around and not doing anything would be. And we actively encourage it. It's a brilliant hobby for people who aren't necessarily into sort of running or more tedious sports, because you get that level of activity without it being tedious. You know, you're moving your muscles, you're moving your joints, but it's fun, it's engaging, it keeps your mind occupied. It's brilliant for that. But certainly as you get older, and if you've been doing it for a long period of time, and if you look at the older skaters now, they all do variations of some physiological kind of extras as well, just because it will extend how long they can skate for into their lives. And skaters do skate long into their lives. Like, look at people like Tony Hawk. The first example that comes to mind, he's what, 52, 53, and he's still throwing out 540s in his round. But with that longevity comes that kind of need to make sure that you are doing maybe a little bit extra. Certainly for somebody who's like me, who's quite tall and flexible, just working on my hips and working on my ankles and my knees outside of skateboarding has made a huge difference this year in how how less stiff I feel on the skateboard. So usually it might take me 10-15 minutes to warm up when I'm skateboarding. Ordinarily I just roll around. But at the moment, certainly this year, just doing it outside of that, mobility exercises at home in the mornings and evenings, meant that when I was skating, I was ready to move. Like I could crash down to an ollie, pop high pretty much straight away. There'll be a huge number of skateboarders who this section right now won't appeal to them at all. They've probably turned it off at this point. They're not listening anymore. But certainly for people of a certain age who are quite stiff or who might have sort of underlying health conditions, it is beneficial to sort of look after yourself and make sure that you do, because it will make skateboarding that much easier. Yeah,
that's a good point, actually. I have one of those. An underlying health condition. Yeah, I'm diabetic. So if any of you diabetic skateboarders want to come at me and talk about that, there's some barriers to that too, I suppose. In terms of the, like we said about the cardio side of it, the sweating side of it, the long periods of non-stop exercise side of it, definitely it can take its toll. But I forget that, I forget that when I'm with you, you make me feel like a healthier man.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear. I try not to be that guy, but I've kind of fitted into that niche at this point.
James, man, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Jack, it's been more of a pleasure.
I look forward to skating with you again soon.
Yeah,
and doing some yoga at the side of the skate park.
If you love skateboarding but you're just not very good at jumping up and down on your favorite piece of wood,